The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the worn floorboards of Henderson's General Store in Copper Ridge, Montana. Maeve Sullivan stood behind the counter, her calloused hands carefully wrapping a bundle of dried herbs for Mrs. Blackwood, one of the town's more particular customers. At 28, Maeve had worked in this store for nearly a decade, and she knew every creak of its old bones, every customer's preferences, every whispered conversation that floated through its aisles. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That'll be $4.30, Mrs. Blackwood, Maeve said, her voice steady and professional, despite the way the older woman's eyes raked over her appearance with barely concealed disapproval. Mrs. Blackwood sniffed, fishing for coins from her embroidered purse. You know, dear, if you put a little more effort into your appearance, perhaps you wouldn't still be working retail at your age. My niece just got engaged, and she's only 23. Maeve's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but she maintained her polite smile. She'd heard variations of this comment countless times. Her auburn hair, usually pulled back in a practical braid, had escaped in wisps around her face from a long day's work. Her dress, though clean and well-mended, was simple calico, functional, not fashionable. She wore no rouge, no powder, no jewelry except for the small silver locket her mother had left her. I'm quite content. Mrs. Blackwood, have a pleasant evening. As the bell above the door chimed with the woman's departure, Maeve allowed herself a moment of frustration, pressing her palms flat against the counter. She wasn't beautiful by conventional standards. She knew this. Her face was too angular, her frame too thin from years of hard work and modest means. Her skin bore the faint marks of childhood illness, small scars that makeup might have hidden if she'd had the money or inclination for such things. But what stung wasn't the assessment itself. It was the assumption that her worth could be measured solely by her marriageability, as if the books she devoured late at night, her skill with numbers that kept the store's accounts immaculate, or her knowledge of medicinal herbs meant nothing at all. The bell chimed again, and Maeve looked up to see Thomas Henderson, the store owner's son, entering through the back. At 35, Thomas was pleasant-looking in an unremarkable way, with thinning brown hair and a soft middle that spoke of a life largely spent indoors. "Maeve, I need to speak with you," he said, his tone carrying an unfamiliar weight. She straightened, sensing something significant in his manner. "Of course, Mr. Henderson. Thomas, please. I've told you to call me Thomas." He moved closer, wringing his hands in a gesture she'd seen him make when tallying difficult sums. "I've been thinking about this for some time now, and I believe it's the practical solution for both of us." Maeve's stomach tightened with apprehension. "You're a hard worker, reliable, and you know this business inside and out. My father's health is failing, and I'll be taking over the store completely within the year." He paused, meeting her eyes with what he clearly believed was sincerity. "I think we should marry." The words hung in the air between them like a business proposition, which Maeve realized with a sinking heart was exactly what this was. "You're proposing marriage?" she asked carefully. "Yes, it makes sense, doesn't it? You need security, a home of your own. I need someone who can help run the store, someone I can trust. We get along well enough." It's a practical arrangement. There it was. Not a word about affection, respect, or even basic attraction. Just practicality. Maeve felt something inside her chest grow cold and hard. "That's very pragmatic of you, Thomas," she said slowly. "But I'm afraid I must decline." His eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "Decline? Maeve, you should consider this carefully. You're not getting any younger, and frankly, you're not likely to receive many other offers. I'm being realistic here. This is probably your best opportunity," the condescension in his voice, the absolute certainty that she should be grateful for his lukewarm proposal, sparked something fierce in Maeve's chest. "I would rather live independently on my own terms than marry someone who sees me as merely a practical solution to a business problem," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Thank you for the offer, but no." Thomas's face flushed. "You're making a mistake. You think you're too good for this for me?" Look at yourself, Maeve. You're plain, you're poor, and you're not getting any prettier with age. I'm offering you a respectable life, and you're throwing it away out of pride. Then I suppose my pride is all I have, Maeve replied, though his words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. Will that be all, Mr. Henderson? The formality of her address wasn't lost on him. His expression hardened. Perhaps it's time we discussed your employment here. My father may have been content with your work, but I have different standards. The threat was clear. Maeve felt the floor shift beneath her feet, but she held his gaze. I understand. Shall I finish out the week? That won't be necessary. You can collect your final wages on Friday. I'll manage until then. With that, Thomas turned and disappeared into the back office, leaving Maeve alone in the store that had been her livelihood for 10 years. She stood there for a long moment, the reality of her situation settling over her like a heavy blanket. She had modest savings, enough for perhaps 2 months if she was extremely careful. Her room at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was paid through the end of the month. After that, Maeve shook her head, refusing to let panic take hold. She'd figure something out. She always did. That evening, Copper Ridge's streets were quiet as Maeve walked back to the boarding house. The town sat in a valley surrounded by vast ranching territory, its main street lined with false-fronted buildings that had seen better days. The mines that once made Copper Ridge prosperous had played out years ago, leaving behind a community sustained by ranching and the railroad that passed through twice weekly. At the boarding house, Maeve climbed the narrow stairs to her small room under the eaves. It was sparse but clean, a narrow bed, a washstand, a trunk for her clothes, and a small shelf of precious books she'd collected over the years. She lit the oil lamp and sat on the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of the day. She'd lost her position. She'd rejected what might indeed be her only marriage proposal, and Thomas's words echoed in her mind. You're plain, you're poor, and you're not getting any prettier. Maeve pulled out the small mirror from her trunk, something she rarely did, and studied her reflection in the lamplight. Angular cheekbones, a straight nose, grey eyes that seemed too large for her face, small scars near her left temple from the fever she'd survived as a child, lips too thin, hair too unruly, skin too pale from indoor work. She set the mirror down, face down on the bed. Enough, she whispered to herself. This isn't who you are. She reached for the newspaper she'd saved from earlier in the week, spreading it across her lap. She'd been scanning the advertisements section, something she did habitually, though she'd never had reason to act on any posting before. Her eyes moved down the columns. Ranch hands wanted, seamstresses needed, a teaching position in a town 3 days' journey away. Then one caught her eye. Housekeeper wanted. Responsible woman for a large household. Room and board provided. Duties include general housekeeping and care. References required. Inquire at Thornhill Ranch, 15 miles north of Copper Ridge. Ask for Mrs. Dorothy Chen. Maeve read it 3 times. Thornhill Ranch. She knew the name. Everyone in the territory did. It was one of the largest cattle operations in Montana, sprawling across thousands of acres. The Thornhill family had built their fortune during the territory's early days and had maintained their prominence through shrewd business and, according to local gossip, an almost ruthless determination to succeed. The current owner, Garrett Thornhill, was something of a legend. At 6'6" and built like the mountains that ringed his property, he cut an imposing figure on his rare visits to town. Maeve had seen him perhaps 3 times in all her years. At the store, a man of few words, hard eyes, and an air of absolute authority. He'd been widowed young, his wife dying in childbirth along with their baby. Or so the story went. That had been years ago. Now he ran his ranch with an iron fist and no apparent interest in remarrying. The position wasn't for him directly, Maeve reasoned. It was for the household, which surely had other staff. She had references. Old Mr. Henderson, despite everything, would likely provide one for her years of faithful service. Mrs. Patterson would vouch for her character, and she desperately needed work. She folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside. Tomorrow she would write to Mrs. Chen. It might come to nothing, but at least it was action, a step forward rather than wallowing in self-pity. As she prepared for bed, Maeve's mind wandered to the strange irony of her situation. She'd rejected Thomas's proposal because she wanted more than to be valued for mere utility. Yet now she was applying for a position that was exactly that. Hired help, valued only for her ability to clean, cook, and maintain a household. But there was a crucial difference, she told herself as she extinguished the lamp. A job was honest work for honest pay. It didn't require her to pretend at affection she didn't feel or bind her life to someone who saw her as little more than a business asset. She would be an employee, not a wife settling for less than she deserved. The next morning, Maeve rose early and composed her letter at the boarding house's small writing desk in the common room. She kept it professional and straightforward, listing her experience, her skills, and her availability. She mentioned her references and her willingness to travel to Thornhill Ranch for an interview at Mrs. Chen's convenience. She posted the letter at the general store, a bittersweet errand, walking into the place she'd called her workplace for so long. A different clerk, young Billy Morrison, helped her with the postage. He was too new to understand the significance of her visit, which Maeve found oddly comforting. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 3 days passed. Maeve spent them taking inventory of her belongings, mending her clothes, and helping Mrs. Patterson with extra chores around the boarding house to offset her rent. The landlady, a shrewd but kind woman in her 60s, had heard about the situation at Henderson's store through the town's efficient gossip network. That Thomas Henderson is a fool, Mrs. Patterson declared over dinner one evening. Any man who can't see your worth isn't worth having. Perhaps he saw my worth quite clearly, Maeve replied with a sad smile. He just calculated it in purely practical terms. Then he's not just a fool, but a blind one. You'll find something better, dear. Mark my words. On the 4th day, a reply arrived. Maeve's hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Bearing the Thornhill Ranch seal, a stylized T within a circle, the letter was brief. Written in a clear, efficient hand, Miss Sullivan, your letter has been received and your qualifications reviewed. Please present yourself at Thornhill Ranch this Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning for an interview. Bring your references and be prepared to discuss your experience in detail. The position requires residence on the property. Should you be offered employment, you would begin immediately. Arrangements have been made for your transport from Copper Ridge. A wagon will collect you from the boarding house at 8 o'clock sharp. Yours in business, Mrs. Dorothy Chen, household manager. Thornhill Ranch. Maeve read the letter twice, her heart beating faster. Saturday was 2 days away. This was real. This was happening. She spent Friday preparing. She washed and pressed her best dress, a deep green cotton that, while simple, was in good repair and made her grey eyes appear almost luminous. She polished her boots, cleaned and repaired her gloves, and braided her hair in a neat coronet that, while not fashionable, looked tidy and professional. Mrs. Patterson helped her pack a small case with her essential belongings, just in case the interview went well, and she was indeed expected to begin immediately. You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Patterson said, squeezing Maeve's hand. Sometimes we have to take a leap into the unknown. The known wasn't serving you anymore. That night, Maeve barely slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what awaited her at Thornhill Ranch. She knew so little beyond the basic facts: large property, wealthy family, the intimidating owner who loomed large in local legend. She thought again of Garrett Thornhill as she'd seen him in town, towering over everyone, his face weathered and stern, his presence commanding. People moved out of his way instinctively. Shopkeepers were extra attentive when he made his rare purchases. He spoke in a low, gravelly voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest, and he suffered no fools. What would it be like to work in his household? Would she see him often, or would he be an absent figure, present only in the authority he wielded over the property and everyone on it? Morning came with agonizing slowness. Maeve dressed carefully, checked her appearance one final time in the mirror, and carried her case downstairs. Mrs. Patterson had prepared an early breakfast, insisting Maeve eat something despite her nervous stomach. At precisely 8 o'clock, a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 horses arrived outside the boarding house. The driver, an older man with a weathered face and kind eyes, introduced himself as Walter, the ranch foreman. "Miss Sullivan, I'm here to take you to Thornhill Ranch. Mrs. Chen's expecting you." Maeve climbed aboard, her case stowed in the back. As the wagon pulled away from the boarding house, she took one last look at Copper Ridge, the town where she'd lived most of her adult life, where she'd been judged and found wanting, where she'd refused to settle for less than she deserved. Whatever lay ahead at Thornhill Ranch, it had to be better than staying in a place where her worth was measured only by her appearance and her marriageability. The wagon rolled northward, leaving the town behind. Maeve faced forward toward the unknown, her hands folded in her lap and her spine straight. She might not be pretty enough by Thomas Henderson's standards, or refined enough by Mrs. Blackwood's measure, but she was capable, intelligent, and determined. That would have to be enough. The journey to Thornhill Ranch took nearly 2 hours, the wagon following a well-worn trail that climbed gradually through rolling grasslands dotted with cattle. Walter, the foreman, proved to be a man of few words, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Maeve was content to observe the landscape transforming around her. The ranch's territory began long before the main compound came into view. Fences stretched across the horizon, dividing pastures where hundreds of cattle grazed. Maeve spotted ranch hands in the distance, working with horses, mending fence lines, moving livestock. The scale of the operation was staggering. This was no modest family farm, but a true empire built on land and cattle. "Ranch covers about 40,000 acres, Walter said, breaking his silence as if reading her thoughts. "Mr. Thornhill's grandfather claimed this land back in 1849, built it from nothing." "It's impressive," Maeve replied honestly. Walter nodded. "It's hard work keeping it running. Mr. Thornhill don't tolerate laziness or incompetence. You'll find that out quick enough if Mrs. Chen hires you." There was no judgment in his tone, just a statement of fact. Maeve appreciated the straightforwardness. As they crested a hill, the main ranch compound finally came into view, and Maeve couldn't suppress a small intake of breath. The main house was a massive 2-story structure built of stone and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around at least 3 sides. Multiple chimneys jutted from the roof, and large windows reflected the morning sun. Surrounding it were various outbuildings, barns, stables, a bunkhouse, storage structures, and what appeared to be a separate kitchen building. The wagon rolled into a circular drive in front of the main house. Walter helped Maeve down and retrieved her case. "Mrs. Chen's office is through the main entrance, first door on your left. She's expecting you." "Thank you, Walter." Maeve climbed the porch steps, her boots sounding hollow on the wooden planks. The front door was substantial oak, carved with an intricate design of mountains and pine trees. She lifted the heavy brass knocker and let it fall. The door opened almost immediately, revealing a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver-streaked black hair pulled into a neat bun. She wore a practical dark blue dress with a white collar, and her posture radiated efficiency. "Miss Sullivan, punctual, that's a good start. I'm Dorothy Chen, household manager. Please come in." Maeve stepped into an entry hall that spoke of wealth without ostentation. The floors were polished hardwood, the walls paneled in rich wood. A substantial staircase led to the second floor, and she could see multiple doorways leading to other rooms. Everything was impeccably clean and organized. Mrs. Chen led her to a small office off the main hall, a room lined with shelves containing ledgers, household records, and what appeared to be inventory lists. A desk sat beneath a window that looked out over the side yard, and two chairs faced each other near a small fireplace. "Please, sit." Mrs. Chen gestured to one of the chairs as she took the other, producing a small notebook and pencil. "Your letter indicated 10 years of experience at Henderson's General Store. Tell me about your responsibilities there." Maeve sat, folding her hands in her lap. "I managed the main floor, assisted customers, maintained inventory records, placed orders with suppliers, and handled the daily accounts. I also prepared the monthly financial summaries for Mr. Henderson Sr." Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "Financial summaries? That's unusual for floor staff. Mr. Henderson discovered I had a talent for numbers. He taught me his accounting system, and I took over that responsibility about 5 years ago. Can you read and write well?" "Yes, ma'am. I completed school through the 8th grade, and I've continued reading on my own since then." Mrs. Chen made notes. "Cooking? Basic meals, nothing fancy. I can follow recipes accurately and adjust portions for different numbers of people. Cleaning, laundry, mending, all of those, yes. Medical knowledge?" Maeve hesitated. "Some. My mother was skilled with herbs and home remedies. She taught me before she passed. I know how to treat common ailments, prepare poultices, and recognize which plants are medicinal versus poisonous." Mrs. Chen's pen paused, and she looked up with renewed interest. "That's valuable. We're 15 miles from town, and the doctor doesn't always make house calls promptly. Having someone with medical knowledge on site would be beneficial." She set down her notebook. "Miss Sullivan, I'll be direct with you. This position isn't what you might expect for a typical housekeeping role. Let me explain the situation." Maeve leaned forward slightly, giving Mrs. Chen her full attention. "Thornhill Ranch employs approximately 30 people year-round, more during cattle drives and peak seasons. Most are ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse or in cabins on the property. We have a cook who manages the bunkhouse meals and a separate kitchen staff here at the main house. I manage the household operations, the accounts, and coordinate the various staff." She paused, seeming to measure her words carefully. "The position I'm hiring for is specifically focused on the upstairs quarters. Mr. Thornhill's daughter, Lily, is 7 years old. Her previous governess left 2 months ago to care for her ailing mother back east. Since then, we've been managing her care between myself and Sarah, one of the housemaids. But it's not sustainable. Sarah has her own responsibilities, and I'm stretched too thin, managing the entire household." Maeve's pulse quickened. "So this is a governess position?" "Governess, teacher, companion, and yes, housekeeper for the family quarters. Lily needs education, supervision, and care. The upstairs rooms need maintaining. Mr. Thornhill is particular about his private space and his daughter's well-being. The person in this role must be trustworthy, discreet, capable of teaching a bright but somewhat lonely child, and able to manage household tasks without constant supervision." Mrs. Chen leaned back in her chair, studying Maeve. "It's a demanding position. You'd have your own room in the main house, all meals provided, and a salary of $30 per month, significantly more than typical housekeeping wages because of the additional responsibilities. $30 a month. Maeve had made 18 at the general store. It was more money than she'd imagined. "Why did you leave Henderson's?" Mrs. Chen asked abruptly. Maeve had anticipated this question and had decided on the truth. "The owner's son proposed marriage. I declined. He then terminated my employment." "Why did you decline?" The bluntness of the question caught Maeve off guard, but she appreciated it. "He made it clear his proposal was based on practical considerations rather than any genuine affection or respect. I preferred to seek honest employment rather than enter a marriage built on such a foundation." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly, something like approval flickering in her eyes. "You have principles. That's good. But it can also mean you're stubborn. Can you follow instructions even when you disagree with them?" "Yes, provided they're not unethical or harmful." "Fair enough." Mrs. Chen stood and moved to her desk, retrieving 2 letters. "I took the liberty of contacting your references. Mr. Henderson Sr. wrote that you were his most reliable employee and that he was sorry to lose you. Mrs. Patterson says you're honest, hard-working, and one of the most well-read people she's ever met. Maeve felt a warmth in her chest at this validation. Particularly from old Mr. Henderson. I'm prepared to offer you the position, Miss Sullivan, with a 1-month trial period. During that time, either party may terminate the arrangement with 1 week's notice. After the trial, if we both agree to continue, it becomes a permanent position requiring 1 month's notice for termination. Are these terms acceptable? Maeve's mind raced. This was happening. A real offer, good wages, a chance to leave Copper Ridge behind. But she needed to know more. May I ask a question about Mr. Thornhill? Mrs. Chen's expression became more guarded. You may ask. What are his expectations regarding his daughter's care? And how involved is he in the daily routine? Mr. Thornhill loves his daughter deeply, but he's not demonstrative. He's a hard man, Miss Sullivan. Life made him that way. He expects Lily to be well-educated, properly cared for, safe and happy, in that order. He takes breakfast in his study at 6, spends his days managing ranch operations, and returns for dinner at 7. He sees Lily for an hour each evening before her bedtime. His expectations for you would be that you handle everything efficiently and competently without requiring his intervention. And if there are problems or decisions that need his input, you bring them to me first. I bring them to him only if necessary. Mr. Thornhill doesn't like to be bothered with minor household matters. He trusts his staff to handle their responsibilities. Maeve nodded slowly. And Lily? What is she like? For the first time, Mrs. Chen's stern expression softened into something almost maternal. She's a sweet child, bright and curious, but she's also been through more loss than any 7-year-old should bear. Her mother died giving birth to her, a fact she learned too young when some cruel child in town told her during a visit 2 years ago. She blames herself, though that's nonsense. Mr. Thornhill has had difficulty connecting with her emotionally since then. I think he sees too much of his lost wife in Lily's face. The complexity of the situation was becoming clearer. This wasn't just housekeeping and teaching. It was stepping into a household marked by grief and emotional distance. I'll take the position, Maeve said, and I'll do everything I can to help Lily thrive. Mrs. Chen extended her hand, and they shook firmly. Good. Let me show you to your room, and then you'll meet Lily. She's in the schoolroom currently with Sarah, working on her reading. They climbed the grand staircase to the 2nd floor. The hallway was wide and well lit by windows at each end. Mrs. Chen pointed out various rooms as they walked. Mr. Thornhill's suite at one end, his study, a drawing room, guest rooms, and finally, Lily's room and the schoolroom. Your room is here, Mrs. Chen said, opening a door near the middle of the hall. It connects to the schoolroom through that door there, and you're close enough to Lily's room to hear if she needs you at night. Maeve stepped into her new quarters and felt her breath catch. The room was at least 3 times the size of her boarding house space. A full-sized bed with a simple but lovely quilt occupied one corner. There was a wardrobe, a dresser with a mirror, a small writing desk beneath a window that looked out over the ranch's fields, and even a comfortable chair near a small fireplace. A door led to a private washroom, a luxury she'd never experienced. It's beautiful, Maeve said honestly. It's functional, Mrs. Chen corrected, but her tone was pleased. Unpack your things, take a few moments to settle, and then come to the schoolroom. I'll introduce you to Lily. After Mrs. Chen departed, Maeve stood in the center of her new room, slowly turning to take it all in. Sunlight streamed through the window, dust motes dancing in the beams. She could hear the distant sounds of the ranch, horses whinnying, men calling to each other, the lowing of cattle. She unpacked her modest belongings, 3 dresses, undergarments, nightgowns, her small collection of books, the silver locket, her writing materials, and the bundle of dried herbs she always kept on hand. Everything fit easily into the wardrobe and dresser, leaving them still mostly empty. When she was done, Maeve washed her face and hands in the washroom, marveling at the indoor plumbing, and checked her reflection. She looked tired from the journey but presentable. Taking a deep breath, she opened the connecting door to the schoolroom. The room was bright and spacious, with shelves of books, a blackboard, a globe, maps on the walls, and a child-sized desk and chair. At the desk sat a small girl with dark brown hair braided down her back, wearing a simple but well-made dress. Beside her stood a young woman in her 20s, Sarah, presumably, pointing at something in the book before them. Both looked up as Maeve entered. "Miss Sullivan," Mrs. Chen said, appearing behind her. "This is Lily Thornhill and our housemaid Sarah Winters." Sarah, a friendly-looking woman with freckles and red hair, smiled warmly. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Sullivan. I'm glad you're here. Lily's been looking forward to having a proper teacher again." Maeve moved closer, kneeling beside the desk so she was at eye level with the child. Lily had her father's dark hair, but softer features. Her eyes were a striking hazel, framed by long lashes, and they studied Maeve with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. "Hello, Lily," Maeve said gently. "I'm very pleased to meet you." Lily regarded her seriously for a long moment. "Are you going to leave like Miss Patterson did?" The question was direct and tinged with barely hidden vulnerability. Maeve understood immediately that this child had learned not to invest too quickly in the people who entered her life. "I don't plan to leave," Maeve said honestly. "I've come here hoping this will be my home. But I suppose we'll both need some time to see if we suit each other. What do you think?" Lily considered this. "Can you teach arithmetic? Miss Patterson wasn't very good at it. I'm quite good at arithmetic, actually. It's one of my favorite subjects. Can you read well? I like stories. I love to read, and I love stories. Perhaps we can read together. Do you know about horses? Papa says I should learn to ride properly, but Miss Patterson was afraid of them." Maeve smiled. "I haven't ridden much myself, but I'm not afraid of horses. Maybe we could both learn together?" For the first time, a small smile flickered across Lily's serious face. "That would be all right, I suppose." Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. "Lily, Miss Sullivan will be taking over your lessons starting tomorrow. Today she's getting settled. Sarah, please show Miss Sullivan the family quarters and explain the daily routine. I need to attend to some matters in the kitchen." After Mrs. Chen left, Sarah proved to be a valuable guide. She walked Maeve through the upstairs, explaining the schedule, the household rules, and the particular quirks of Thornhill Ranch. "Mr. Thornhill is a fair man, but a hard one," Sarah said as they stood in the hallway. "He expects things done right the first time. Don't waste his time with excuses or complaints. But he's not cruel. He pays well and he takes care of his people. Just don't cross him." "What happens if you cross him?" Maeve asked. Sarah's expression darkened. "You get dismissed on the spot. I've seen it happen twice in the 3 years I've been here. Both times the person deserved it. One was stealing, the other was drunk on the job. But there was no discussion, no second chances. Mr. Thornhill values loyalty and competence above all else." They returned to the schoolroom where Lily had gone back to her reading. The child read aloud when Maeve asked, and it was immediately clear she was bright. Her comprehension was excellent, though her pronunciation occasionally stumbled over unfamiliar words. The afternoon passed in a blur of learning routines, meeting the kitchen staff, touring the parts of the house she'd be responsible for maintaining, and beginning to understand the scope of her new position. By the time late afternoon arrived, Maeve was exhausted but also energized. This was real work, meaningful work, and she was already forming ideas for Lily's education. "Dinner for the household staff is at 5:30 in the kitchen," Sarah explained. "Mr. Thornhill and Lily dine in the small dining room at 7. You'll be responsible for getting Lily ready for dinner and bringing her down. After dinner, Mr. Thornhill spends time with her in the drawing room until 8. Then you take her upstairs for bed." "Does he read to her?" "Play games?" Sarah shook her head. "He mostly asks about her day, checks that she's been good, that sort of thing. He's not. He doesn't really know how to be with her, I think. It's sad, really. She craves his attention, and he clearly loves her, but there's this distance between them." At precisely 7 o'clock, Maeve helped Lily into a clean dress and brought her downstairs. The small dining room was elegantly appointed with a mahogany table, fine china, and silver candlesticks. Lily took her usual seat, leaving the head of the table open. "Papa's always exactly on time," Lily whispered to Maeve. "You should wait by the door until he arrives." Maeve positioned herself near the doorway, uncertain what to expect. She'd seen Garrett Thornhill from a distance in town, but never up close, never in his own domain. At exactly 7, she heard boots in the hallway, heavy, measured steps. Then he appeared in the doorway, and Maeve had to consciously keep her expression neutral. Garrett Thornhill was even more imposing up close. At 6'6", he had to duck slightly to clear the doorframe. His shoulders were broad, his frame muscular from years of hard physical labor. His face was weathered and hard-lined, with a strong jaw covered in dark stubble, a prominent nose that had clearly been broken at least once, and deep-set eyes of such a dark brown they appeared almost black. His hair, nearly black with threads of silver at the temples, was slightly too long, brushing his collar. He wore work clothes, denim pants, a chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle, and boots that had seen serious use. There was nothing refined about his appearance, but there was an undeniable presence, a sense of coiled power barely contained. His dark eyes swept the room, taking in Lily at the table, then landing on Maeve. For a moment his gaze held hers, and she saw surprise flicker across his features. He hadn't expected to see her here. "Papa," Lily said, her voice brightening. "This is Miss Sullivan. She's my new teacher, and she likes arithmetic, and she's not afraid of horses." Garrett Thornhill's expression remained impassive as he moved to his seat at the head of the table. His eyes never left Maeve's face, studying her with an intensity that felt almost physical. "Miss Sullivan," he said, his voice that same low rumble she remembered from the store. "Mrs. Chen mentioned she was hiring someone." "Welcome to Thornhill Ranch." The words were polite, but his tone was neutral to the point of coldness. He gestured to the chair beside Lily. "You'll take your meals with us during this trial period. Mrs. Chen wants to ensure you understand the family routine." Maeve took her seat, acutely aware of his presence at the head of the table. The kitchen staff brought in the food, roasted chicken, potatoes, vegetables, fresh bread, and for several minutes the only sounds were the clink of silverware and Lily's quiet commentary about her day. "Miss Sullivan helped me with my reading," Lily said. She explained why though and thought sound different, even though they look similar. "It finally makes sense." "That's good," Garrett said, his attention on his plate. "And tomorrow we're going to start a new arithmetic lesson. Miss Sullivan says she'll show me how numbers can tell stories." Maeve watched the interaction with a growing sense of sadness. Lily was trying so hard to engage her father, and he was clearly present but distant, as if he didn't know how to bridge the gap between them. "Mr. Thornhill," Maeve said carefully, "Lily's reading comprehension is quite advanced for her age. Mrs. Chen mentioned that you value education. I'd like to know what your specific goals are for Lily's schooling so I can structure her lessons accordingly." He looked up then, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. The intensity of his gaze was unnerving, but Maeve held it. "I want her educated like any son would be," he said bluntly. "Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, science. Not just the typical female accomplishments, music and needlework and such. Those too, if she wants them, but not instead of real learning." "That's excellent," Maeve said. "I share that philosophy. I'll develop a comprehensive curriculum." He studied her for another moment, and she couldn't read his expression. Then he turned back to his dinner, effectively ending the conversation. The rest of the meal passed in stilted near silence. Afterward, as Sarah had described, Garrett led Lily to the drawing room. Maeve started to follow, but he held up a hand. "I'll call for you when it's time for bed." Dismissed, Maeve retreated to the kitchen where the staff was having their own dinner. She was welcomed warmly, introduced to the cook and the other housemaids, and served a generous plate. The kitchen was warm and friendly, a stark contrast to the cold formality of the dining room. Precisely an hour later, Sarah came to fetch her. "Mr. Thornhill's ready for Lily to go up." In the drawing room, Garrett stood by the fireplace while Lily sat on the sofa, looking small and alone in the large space. Whatever conversation they'd had was clearly over. "Come, Lily," Maeve said gently. "Time for bed." Lily hopped down and went to her father. "Good night, Papa." He bent down, a long way down, and kissed the top of her head. "Good night, Lily. Be good for Miss Sullivan." "I will." As Maeve led Lily from the room, she glanced back once. Garrett Thornhill stood by the fireplace, staring into the flames, his massive frame somehow seeming lonely in the large room. Upstairs, Maeve helped Lily into her nightgown, listened to her prayers, and tucked her into bed. The child was clearly used to the routine, but also seemed starved for the small kindnesses, the hair brushing, the covers tucked just so, the gentle touch on her forehead. "Miss Sullivan?" Lily asked as Maeve was about to extinguish the lamp. "Yes? Do you think Papa likes you?" The question surprised her. "I don't know, Lily. Why do you ask?" "He looked at you differently at dinner. Not like he looks at Sarah or Mrs. Chen. Different." Maeve had no idea how to respond to that. "I think your father has a lot on his mind running this big ranch. I'm just here to teach you and help with the house. Papa doesn't like many people," Lily said matter-of-factly. "He says most folks are either incompetent or dishonest. He liked Miss Patterson, though. He said she was capable. That's a good quality to appreciate in people," Maeve said carefully. "Papa says pretty things break easy. That's why he only buys sturdy tools and strong horses." The innocent repetition of her father's philosophy hit Maeve harder than it should have. In Garrett Thornhill's world, apparently, practicality and strength trumped aesthetics. It wasn't so different from Thomas Henderson's view, just expressed more bluntly. "Your papa sounds like a practical man," Maeve said. "Now sleep well. We have lessons tomorrow." In her own room, Maeve prepared for bed, her mind racing. Her first day at Thornhill Ranch had been overwhelming. New people, new routines, new responsibilities. And then there was Garrett Thornhill himself, a man whose presence seemed to fill whatever space he occupied. She thought about the way he'd looked at her at dinner, that long, assessing stare. What had he seen? Another employee to evaluate for competence? Or had Lily been right, that there was something different in his gaze? Maeve shook her head at her own foolishness. It didn't matter. She was here to teach his daughter and maintain his household. What Garrett Thornhill thought of her personally was irrelevant, but as she lay in bed staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, she couldn't quite shake the memory of those dark, intense eyes studying her face, or the deep rumble of his voice saying her name. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, and somewhere below, she heard the low murmur of men's voices as the ranch settled in for the night. This was her new life now, for better or worse. The first week at Thornhill Ranch passed in a whirlwind of activity. Maeve quickly established a routine with Lily, dividing their days into structured lessons that challenged the girl's quick mind while keeping her engaged. Mathematics in the morning when Lily was freshest, followed by reading and writing, then history and geography after lunch. Science lessons happened outdoors whenever possible, examining plants, insects, and the natural world around the ranch. Lily proved to be an eager student, soaking up knowledge like parched earth absorbing rain. But Maeve noticed something troubling. The child was almost too obedient, too careful never to make mistakes or cause problems. There was a guardedness to her, as if she feared that one misstep might cause another important person to disappear from her life. "You don't have to be perfect. You know," Maeve said gently one afternoon when Lily had become visibly distressed over a simple arithmetic error. "Mistakes are how we learn." Lily's eyes had filled with tears. "But Papa says only incompetent people make careless mistakes." "I don't want him to think I'm incompetent." The echo of Garrett Thornhill's harsh philosophy, filtered through a 7-year-old's understanding, broke Maeve's heart. "Your father expects excellence from grown adults who should know better. You're a child who's learning. There's a difference." But Lily remained unconvinced, and Maeve realized that changing this mindset would take time and patience. Her interactions with Garrett himself remained minimal and formal. He appeared at breakfast in his study, a room Maeve had been instructed to clean, but only when he was out on the ranch. He returned for dinner each evening, spent his obligatory hour with Lily, and then disappeared into his study to work on accounts and ranch business until late at night. Their exchanges were brief and professional. He would nod in acknowledgement when they passed in the hallway. He would ask, "Any problems with Lily's lessons?" And she would respond, "None, sir. She's doing well." That was the extent of their conversation, yet Maeve was acutely aware of him in a way she couldn't quite explain. She would hear his boots on the stairs in the early morning and find herself pausing in her work. She would catch glimpses of him through the window, working with the horses or conferring with Walter and the other ranch hands, and she would watch longer than necessary. There was something compelling about the way he moved. Economical, purposeful, radiating quiet authority. She told herself it was simply fascination with a man so different from anyone she'd known. Nothing more. On Saturday of her first week, Mrs. Chen informed her that Garrett had arranged for a riding instructor to come teach Lily proper horsemanship. "Mr. Thornhill believes every person living on a ranch should know how to handle a horse competently," Mrs. Chen explained. "He's arranged for you to take lessons as well, since you'll need to accompany Lily on rides." The instructor turned out to be a weathered cowboy named Jack Morrison, who had infinite patience and a gift for explaining things clearly. The lessons took place in a large corral behind the main barn, with Lily riding a gentle mare named Clover and Maeve on an older gelding called Ranger. What Maeve didn't realize until the second lesson was that Garrett was watching. She spotted him leaning against the corral fence, arms crossed, his dark eyes tracking every movement. Her self-consciousness made her tense, which Ranger immediately sensed, causing him to sidestep nervously. "Relax, Miss Sullivan," Jack called out. "Horse can feel your nerves. Take a breath and settle." Maeve forced herself to breathe deeply, to focus on Jack's instructions rather than the imposing figure watching from the fence. Gradually, Ranger calmed, responding to her lighter touch on the reins. After the lesson, as Maeve helped Lily dismount, Garrett approached. Up close, she was again struck by his sheer size. He made the sturdy corral fence look insubstantial. "You're learning quickly," he said, and Maeve couldn't tell if he was addressing her or Lily. "Miss Sullivan is brave," Lily announced. She was scared at first, but she didn't let it stop her. "That's what you always say bravery is, Papa, doing things even when you're afraid." Something flickered in Garrett's expression. Surprise, perhaps, that his daughter had absorbed and remembered his words. "That's right, Lily. That is what bravery is." He looked at Maeve then, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than cool assessment in his eyes. "Jack says you have good instincts with horses, that you listen and adapt rather than trying to force control." "I'm learning from an excellent teacher," Maeve replied. "See that you keep at it. A person who can't ride is a liability on a ranch this size." He turned to Lily. "Good work today. You're sitting straighter in the saddle." Then he walked away, leaving Maeve standing there, unsure whether she'd just been complimented or simply informed she needed to meet minimum standards. "Papa doesn't usually watch the lessons," Lily said thoughtfully. "I think he wanted to see if you were really not afraid of horses. Like you told me." The thought that Garrett had been testing her claim, verifying her honesty, sent a strange shiver through Maeve. She realized that everything she said and did was likely being evaluated against some internal standard he held. The question was whether she was meeting it. That evening at dinner, Garrett asked Lily about her lessons for the week. For once, his attention seemed more focused, less perfunctory. "Miss Sullivan taught me about the Lewis and Clark expedition," Lily said enthusiastically. "We traced their route on the map, and she explained how they had to learn from the native peoples about which plants were safe to eat. And did you know Sacagawea carried her baby the whole journey? Miss Sullivan says women have always been explorers and adventurers, not just men." Garrett's dark eyes shifted to Maeve. "Is that so?" There was something challenging in his tone, and Maeve met his gaze steadily. History tends to record men's achievements more prominently, but women have always participated in exploration, science, and discovery. I believe Lily should understand the full scope of human accomplishment, not just half of it. She braced herself for disagreement. Many men would bristle at such ideas. But Garrett merely nodded slowly. Fair point. Continue as you see fit. The small victory felt disproportionately significant. As the second week began, Maeve began to understand the rhythms of the ranch more fully. Monday was when the weekly supplies arrived from town, a wagon load of goods that Mrs. Chen meticulously inventoried. Tuesday was laundry day, when the household linens were washed and hung to dry. Wednesday, the ranch hands came to the main house for their monthly pay, lining up at Garrett's study, where he personally handed each man his wages and addressed any concerns. Maeve happened to be upstairs cleaning when she overheard one such exchange. A young ranch hand, probably no more than 20, had apparently damaged some equipment through carelessness. "That's coming out of your pay, Davis," Garrett's deep voice carried through the study door. "You break something through negligence, you pay for it. That's the rule. But Mr. Thornhill, I've got a wife and baby to feed. Then you should have been more careful. Your family's needs don't excuse sloppy work. Every man here knows the standards. Meet them or find employment elsewhere." The harshness of it struck Maeve. Yes, rules were important, but surely there was room for understanding, for second chances. Later that day, she worked up the courage to mention it to Mrs. Chen while they were reviewing the household accounts together. "Mr. Thornhill seems very unforgiving," Maeve ventured carefully. Mrs. Chen looked up from the ledger. "He's running a business, Miss Sullivan, not a charity. But before you judge him too harshly, you should know that Davis has been careless 3 times in the past 6 months. Mr. Thornhill warned him twice. This was his 3rd offense. Oh, I didn't realize. Mr. Thornhill keeps track of everything and everyone. He knows which men are reliable, which are trying their best, and which are taking advantage. The reliable ones get bonuses. The ones trying their best get extra training. The ones taking advantage get warnings, then consequences." Mrs. Chen returned to the ledger. "It may seem harsh, but it's fair. Everyone knows exactly where they stand." That evening, Maeve witnessed another side of Garrett's management style. She was walking past his study, on her way to prepare Lily for bed, when she heard voices. "Can't afford the doctor." "Mr. Thornhill, my boy's cough is getting worse. But the fee, take him to Doc Morrison tomorrow," Garrett's voice interrupted. "Tell him to bill me directly. Your wages will be docked $5 a month until it's paid off, interest-free." "Thank you, sir. I swear I'll work extra to make up for it." "I don't want you working extra. I want you focused and safe during your regular hours. A tired man makes mistakes. Take care of your boy, pay back what you owe when you can, and do your job properly. That's all I require." Maeve moved quickly away before she could be caught eavesdropping, but the exchange shifted something in her understanding. Garrett Thornhill wasn't simply harsh, he was complicated, demanding but not unreasonable, hard but not heartless. The 3rd week brought an unexpected challenge. Lily woke up one morning with a fever, complaining of a sore throat and headache. Maeve immediately went to Mrs. Chen, who examined the child and looked worried. Could be nothing, could be scarlet fever. "We had a case in the bunkhouse last month," Mrs. Chen said grimly. "Mr. Thornhill will need to know." Garrett was already out on the ranch, so Mrs. Chen sent a rider to fetch him. While they waited, Maeve stayed with Lily, keeping cool cloths on her forehead and trying to keep her comfortable. The child was frightened. She remembered the fever that had taken her mother, even though she'd been too young to fully understand it at the time. "Am I going to die like Mama?" Lily asked, her small voice trembling. "No, sweetheart. We're going to take very good care of you, and you're going to be fine," Maeve said with more confidence than she felt. She'd seen scarlet fever before. It could be deadly, especially in children. Garrett arrived within the hour, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into Lily's room, his face showing more emotion than Maeve had ever seen, raw fear barely contained. "How is she?" His voice was tight. "Fever, sore throat, headache," Maeve reported. "No rash yet, but Mrs. Chen is concerned it might be scarlet fever." Garrett moved to Lily's bedside, and for the first time, Maeve saw his imposing exterior crack. He knelt beside the bed, making himself small, and took his daughter's hand gently in his massive one. "Papa," Lily whispered. "I'm scared, I know, little one. But you're strong. You're Thornhill, and we're fighters." His thumb stroked her small hand. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you." Mrs. Chen entered with a basin of cool water and fresh cloths. "Dr. Morrison is out at the Fletcher Ranch for a difficult birth. He won't be available until tomorrow at the earliest." Garrett's jaw clenched. "What do we do until then?" Maeve stepped forward. "I've treated fever before. We keep her cool, make sure she drinks plenty of fluids, and watch for the rash. If it's scarlet fever, we'll see it within 24 hours. Fine red bumps, usually starting on the chest and neck." "You're sure you know what you're doing?" Garrett's eyes bore into her, desperate and demanding at once. "I helped my mother nurse 3 children through scarlet fever. All 3 survived. I know the signs and I know the treatments." She met his gaze steadily. "Trust me, Mr. Thornhill, I won't let anything happen to her either." Something passed between them in that moment, an unspoken agreement, a fragile bridge of trust. Garrett nodded once, sharply. "Tell me what you need." Over the next 24 hours, Maeve barely left Lily's side. She kept the child cool, coaxed water and broth into her, and monitored every change in her condition. Garrett remained nearby, working in Lily's room rather than his study, his presence a constant, silent vigil. Late that night, when Lily's fever spiked dangerously high, Maeve prepared a cool bath. "We need to bring her temperature down quickly," she told Garrett. Together, they carried the semi-conscious child to the washroom. Garrett held Lily, while Maeve sponged her with cool water, working efficiently despite her own exhaustion. His hands were surprisingly gentle for such a large man, supporting his daughter as if she were made of glass. "She's all I have," he said suddenly, his voice rough. He couldn't finish the sentence. "She's going to be fine," Maeve said firmly. "The fever is breaking. Feel her forehead. It's already cooler." He did, and she saw the relief wash over his face. They wrapped Lily in towels and carried her back to bed. Within an hour, the child was sleeping peacefully, her fever significantly reduced. Garrett stood beside the bed, watching his daughter breathe. "You should rest, Miss Sullivan. You've been up for nearly 30 hours. So have you. I'm her father. It's different. I'm her teacher. That means I'm responsible for her well-being too." Maeve straightened the blankets around Lily. "Besides, I want to watch for the rash. If this is scarlet fever, we'll know soon." He studied her face in the lamplight. "You really do care about her? This isn't just a job to you." "No," Maeve admitted. "It isn't. Why?" The question was blunt. "You've only known her for 3 weeks." Maeve considered her answer carefully. "Because she's a remarkable child who deserves to be seen and valued for who she is. And because—" She hesitated, then continued. "Because I know what it's like to feel like you have to be perfect to deserve love and attention. No child should feel that way." Garrett's expression shifted, something almost like pain crossing his features. "I don't mean to make her feel—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "I don't know how to be what she needs. I know how to run a ranch, manage men, handle livestock. But a little girl who looks just like her mother—" He shook his head. "I keep failing her." The vulnerability in his admission shocked Maeve. This hard, imposing man was revealing a deep insecurity, and she realized it took tremendous courage for him to admit such a thing. "You're not failing her," Maeve said gently. "You're here, aren't you? You stayed by her side all day. You dropped everything the moment you heard she was sick. That's not failure, that's love. You just need to show her that love when she's well, too. Not only when she's in danger." He was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. "You speak plainly. Most people are afraid to be honest with me. Would you prefer I lie?" "No." He almost smiled. She saw it tugging at the corner of his mouth. "No. I value honesty above almost everything else." They stood there in the quiet room, Lily sleeping between them, and Maeve felt the air shift somehow. The distance that had existed between them was still there, but it felt less insurmountable. "You should rest," he said finally. "I'll watch her for a while." Maeve nodded, too exhausted to argue. She retreated to her own room, but left the connecting door open. Through it, she could see Garrett in the chair beside Lily's bed, his large frame looking awkward in the delicate furniture, keeping watch over his daughter. She fell asleep with that image in her mind. Morning brought good news. Lily's fever had broken completely and no rash had appeared. It had been a simple fever after all, frightening but not dangerous. Dr. Morrison confirmed it when he finally arrived that afternoon, and the relief in the household was palpable. By evening, Lily was sitting up in bed, demanding to know how far behind she'd fallen in her lessons. Garrett actually laughed, a short, rusty sound as if he didn't use that particular skill often, and told her she could take one more day to recover before Miss Sullivan put her back to work. After Lily fell asleep that night, Maeve found Garrett waiting for her in the hallway outside the child's room. Miss Sullivan. His voice was quieter than usual. "I wanted to thank you. You took excellent care of Lily. I won't forget it. I was doing my job, Mr. Thornhill." "No." He shook his head. "You went beyond your job. You could have simply kept her comfortable and waited for the doctor. Instead, you used your knowledge and skill to treat her yourself. You stayed awake for over 30 hours. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You cared for her as if she were your own child." Maeve felt heat rise in her cheeks. "She's easy to care about." "Even so." He cleared his throat, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I misjudged you when you first arrived. I thought you were just another employee, competent perhaps, but nothing special. I was wrong." The admission hung in the air between them. Maeve wasn't sure how to respond. This was the man who'd barely spoken to her beyond necessity for 3 weeks, who'd evaluated her with cold professionalism. Now he stood before her, acknowledging he'd been wrong about her. "People often misjudge me," Maeve said finally. "I'm used to it." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Because of your appearance?" The bluntness of the question startled her into honesty. "Yes." "Then people are fools." He said it as if it were a simple statement of fact. "Your value has nothing to do with how you look. It's in what you know, what you can do, how you treat others." I should have recognized that immediately. Maeve's heart was beating faster than it should. "That's a generous reassessment, Mr. Thornhill." "It's an accurate one." He held her gaze. "The trial period is over. I want you to stay permanently, if you're willing. I'll draw up a proper contract, increase your salary to $35 per month, and give you 1 Sunday off per month to spend as you choose. That's very generous. It's what you've earned." He shifted his weight, and for a moment he looked almost uncomfortable. "There's one more thing. I'd like you to join us for meals regularly, not just during a trial period. Lily responds to you in ways she doesn't respond to others. Her conversation is more animated, more engaged when you're present. She needs that." What he wasn't saying, but what Maeve heard nonetheless, was that those dinners were less strained with her there, that her presence somehow made it easier for him to connect with his daughter. "I'd be honored," Maeve said. He nodded once, then turned to leave. But he paused at the top of the stairs and looked back. "Miss Sullivan, what you said last night, about showing Lily love when she's well, not just when she's in danger, I'm going to try to do better. I wanted you to know that." Then he was gone, his boots heavy on the stairs, leaving Maeve standing in the dimly lit hallway, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was still racing. Something had changed in the past 24 hours. The wall between them had developed a crack, and through it she'd glimpsed a man who was more than his hard exterior suggested. A man capable of vulnerability, of admitting fault, of wanting to be better. As she prepared for bed that night, Maeve caught sight of herself in the mirror, the same angular face, the same thin frame, the same unremarkable features that had been deemed insufficient so many times before, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't see those things as failures. Garrett Thornhill, a man who valued competence and honesty above all else, had looked past her appearance and seen her worth. He'd admitted he'd been wrong about her. He'd thanked her. He'd valued her enough to increase her wages and make her position permanent. It shouldn't have mattered so much. It was just a job, just professional respect from an employer. But it did matter. And Maeve was beginning to suspect that Thornhill Ranch and its complicated, imposing owner were going to change her life in ways she was only beginning to understand the weeks following. Lily's illness brought subtle but meaningful changes to life at Thornhill Ranch. Garrett began appearing more frequently during Lily's lessons, standing quietly in the doorway of the schoolroom, observing as Maeve guided his daughter through mathematics problems or discussed the principles of botany. At first his presence made Maeve nervous, but she gradually realized he wasn't evaluating her teaching. He was trying to understand his daughter better, to see the world through Lily's eyes. One afternoon in late spring, Maeve was teaching Lily about the water cycle when she noticed Garrett leaning against the doorframe. She'd been using a glass jar, some ice, and heated water to demonstrate condensation and precipitation. "The water doesn't disappear," Lily said, her eyes wide with understanding. "It just changes form and goes somewhere else." "Exactly right," Maeve confirmed, smiling at the child's excitement. "Like when Mama died," Lily said suddenly, her voice dropping to something quieter. "She didn't disappear. She just changed form and went somewhere else." The room fell silent. Maeve's breath caught, unsure how to respond to such a profound observation from a 7-year-old. She glanced toward the doorway and saw Garrett's face had gone pale, his jaw tight. But instead of retreating as Maeve expected, he stepped fully into the room. That's a beautiful way to think about it, Lily," he said, his voice rougher than usual. He moved to kneel beside his daughter's desk, bringing his towering frame down to her level. "Your mother would have been so proud of how smart you are. How kind, how brave." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Do you really think so? Even though it's my fault she died?" Garrett's expression crumbled. He gathered Lily into his arms, holding her against his chest. "It is not your fault. It was never your fault. Your mother wanted you more than anything in this world. She chose to bring you into it, and she would make the same choice again. Do you understand me?" "But everyone says—" "I don't care what everyone says," Garrett interrupted firmly. "I'm telling you the truth. Your mother died because childbirth is dangerous, not because of anything you did. You were an innocent baby. You are still innocent." Maeve felt tears prick her own eyes as she watched father and daughter finally address the grief that had lived between them for so long. She started to slip quietly from the room to give them privacy. But Garrett's voice stopped her. "Miss Sullivan, please stay." He looked at her over Lily's head, and there was something raw and vulnerable in his expression. "You were right when you said I needed to show Lily love when she's well, not just when she's in danger. I need to be better at this, and I think I need help learning how." The admission cost him something. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched. Garrett Thornhill was not a man accustomed to admitting he needed help with anything. Maeve nodded slowly and returned to her seat. For the next hour, the three of them really talked about loss, about grief, about the ways love persists even when people are gone. Maeve shared stories about her own mother's death, how the pain had eventually transformed into gratitude for the time they'd had together. Garrett spoke haltingly about his wife, Sarah, how she'd been vibrant and fearless, how she'd loved this land as much as he did. "She would have adored you," he told Lily, touching her hair gently. "Every single thing about you. She would have taught you to ride like the wind, to rope cattle, to run this ranch alongside me someday if that's what you wanted." "Can you teach me those things?" Lily asked. "Since Mama can't." Something shifted in Garrett's face, a decision being made in real time. "Yes, I can do that. I should have been doing that all along." After Lily returned to her regular lessons, Garrett lingered in the schoolroom. Maeve busied herself organizing books on the shelf, acutely aware of his presence behind her. "Miss Sullivan, Maeve!" The use of her first name made her turn around. He stood with his hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Thank you for what you did just now, for staying, for sharing your own story, for everything you do here. You don't need to thank me, Mr. Thornhill." "Garrett," he said. "If I'm calling you Maeve, you should call me Garrett. At least in private when it's just the three of us." The intimacy of the suggestion sent warmth through her chest. "Garrett, then," he nodded, seeming satisfied. Then his expression became more serious. "I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you think I've been a terrible father?" Maeve considered her response carefully. "I think you've been a wounded father. There's a difference. You love Lily deeply, that's never been in question. But you've been trying to protect yourself from losing her the way you lost Sarah, and in doing so, you've kept yourself at a distance. Children don't need perfect parents. They need presence." He absorbed this, his dark eyes studying her face with that intensity she'd come to recognize. "You're not afraid to tell me hard truths. Most people won't do that. Most people aren't responsible for your daughter's well-being and education. I have to tell you hard truths when they affect Lily. Is it only about Lily?" The question was asked quietly, but there was something weighted in it, something that made Maeve's pulse quicken. She wasn't sure how to answer, so she deflected. "What else would it be about?" Garrett took a step closer. He was so large that even a single step seemed to change the entire dynamic of the room. "I find myself thinking about our conversations. Looking forward to dinner, not just to see Lily, but to hear your observations about the day. Watching you teach, and being impressed by your intelligence, your patience, your insight." Maeve's heart was hammering now. "Mr. Thornhill Garrett, I'm your employee, I know." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "And that complicates things considerably. But I also know that somewhere in the past 6 weeks, you've become more than just an employee to me. You've become someone I respect deeply, someone whose opinion matters, someone I enjoy being around." The words hung between them, weighted with implication. Maeve knew she should maintain professional distance, should remind him of the power imbalance inherent in their positions. But she also couldn't deny that she'd developed feelings for this complicated, difficult man. She admired his dedication to his ranch, his efforts to be a better father, his blunt honesty, even his high standards that pushed everyone around him to excellence. "I enjoy being around you too," she admitted quietly. "But I need this position. I need stability, the income, the security. I can't risk that by whatever this conversation is becoming." "I would never use your employment as leverage," Garrett said firmly. "If I'm misreading this situation, if you're not interested in anything beyond a professional relationship, you can tell me so right now, and nothing changes. You keep your position, your salary, everything. I give you my word." Maeve believed him. Despite his hardness, despite his sometimes harsh management style, she'd come to understand that Garrett Thornhill was fundamentally honorable. His word meant something. "I'm not uninterested," she said carefully, "but I'm also cautious. I've been judged my entire life for my appearance, found wanting, dismissed as not pretty enough, or refined enough, or whatever enough. I rejected a marriage proposal because I refused to be valued only for my utility. I can't," her voice caught, "I can't let myself care for someone only to discover they see me the same way everyone else does." Garrett's expression darkened. "Who said you weren't pretty enough? Does it matter?" "Yes," his voice had taken on an edge. "It matters to me," Maeve sighed. "A man in town proposed marriage. When I declined, he made it very clear that I should be grateful for the offer given my age and appearance, that I wasn't likely to receive others." "Name," Garrett demanded. "What?" "Give me his name." "Why?" "Because I want to know which fool in Copper Ridge has such poor judgment that he couldn't see your worth." Garrett moved closer still, and now there was barely 2 feet between them. "That man was an idiot, Maeve. You are intelligent, capable, kind, and brave. You care for my daughter as if she were your own. You challenge me to be better. You speak hard truths when they need speaking. And yes, since we're having this conversation, I find you attractive. Your strength, your spirit, the way your eyes flash when you're passionate about something." Maeve felt her face flush. "You don't have to say that. I don't say things I don't mean." He reached out slowly, giving her time to step away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough from work, but surprisingly gentle. "I'm not good with pretty words or romantic gestures. I'm a rancher, not a poet. But I know what I value, and I value you, not for what you can do for me, but for who you are." The sincerity in his voice undid something in Maeve's chest. She'd spent so long being told she wasn't enough that hearing this someone, say she was more than enough felt almost overwhelming. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted. "With what you're telling me? You don't have to do anything right now," Garrett said. "I just needed you to know. Needed you to understand that you're seen here. Truly seen. And what I see is remarkable." Before Maeve could respond, they heard Lily's voice calling from downstairs. The spell broke, and Garrett stepped back, the professional distance reasserting itself. "We should continue this conversation another time," he said, "when we have more privacy and fewer interruptions. But Maeve, think about what I said, please." He left the schoolroom, his boots heavy on the floorboards, and Maeve sank into her chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. The world had shifted somehow. The careful professional relationship she'd maintained had cracked open, revealing something far more complex and dangerous underneath. She pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks, trying to process what had just happened. Garrett Thornhill, stern, imposing, demanding Garrett Thornhill, had essentially declared his interest in her, had called her remarkable, had touched her hair with a tenderness that belied his rough exterior, and more terrifying still, she wanted him to do it again. That evening at dinner, there was a new undercurrent to their interactions. Garrett's eyes lingered on her face when Lily wasn't looking. When passing the serving dishes, their fingers brushed, and neither pulled away immediately. The air felt charged, full of unspoken things. Lily, perceptive as always, noticed something had changed. "Papa, you're smiling more today. Did something good happen?" Garrett's eyes met Maeve's across the table. "Yes, Lily, something very good happened. I had an important conversation that helped me see things more clearly." "What kind of things?" Lily asked innocently. "The kind that help a person understand what really matters," Garrett replied. Still holding Maeve's gaze, later after Lily was in bed, Maeve stood at her window, looking out over the darkened ranch. She could see a light burning in Garrett's study window, could imagine him at his desk, working through accounts or correspondence. Everything in her life had changed in just 6 weeks. She'd gone from being dismissed and undervalued to being seen and appreciated. She'd found meaningful work that challenged and fulfilled her. She'd helped a grieving man reconnect with his daughter. And now, impossibly, she might be on the verge of something more, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, she found Mrs. Chen standing in the hallway, her expression knowing. "I've worked in this house for 15 years, the older woman said without preamble. "I've seen Mr. Thornhill shut himself off from feeling anything after his wife died. I've watched him build walls so high that nobody could reach him. But in 6 weeks, you've made those walls start to crumble. Whatever is happening between you two, I hope you'll be patient with him. He's forgotten how to let himself care for someone. Mrs. Chen, I'm not sure what you think is happening. I think that man is falling for you." Mrs. Chen interrupted gently. "And I think you might be falling for him too. Just be careful with each other. You're both wounded in your own ways. But maybe that means you're exactly what each other needs." She walked away, leaving Maeve standing in her doorway, her heart full of possibilities she'd never dared to imagine before. Below, the ranch settled into the night, and somewhere in his study, a man who valued strength above beauty was realizing that sometimes the strongest thing a person could do was open their heart again. Spring transformed into summer on Thornhill Ranch, bringing longer days and new challenges. The cattle needed to be moved to higher pastures, fences required repairs after winter damage, and preparations began for the annual cattle drive that would take a significant portion of the herd to market. The ranch buzzed with activity, and Garrett was often gone from dawn until well after dark. Despite his absence during the day, he made deliberate efforts to be present for Lily. He began taking her on short rides around the property, teaching her about the land and the business that would one day be part of her legacy. Maeve watched these interactions with quiet satisfaction, seeing the bond between father and daughter strengthen with each passing week. What she hadn't anticipated was how Garrett's newfound openness with Lily would extend to her as well. He started appearing at breakfast, sitting with them in the small dining room rather than taking his meal alone in his study. His conversation remained sparse, but there was a warmth in his presence that hadn't existed before. One morning, he arrived with a book tucked under his arm, a botanical encyclopedia he'd ordered from a distributor in Chicago. He set it on the table beside Maeve's plate without ceremony. "For your science lessons with Lily," he said gruffly. "I noticed you've been using that old field guide that's falling apart. This one has better illustrations." Maeve opened the book, running her fingers over the detailed engravings of plants and flowers. It was expensive, far beyond what was necessary for a child's education. "This is too generous. It's an investment in my daughter's education." But the way his eyes met hers suggested it was more than that. It was a gesture meant specifically for her, disguised as practicality. These small moments accumulated like raindrops filling a basin. A new riding jacket that appeared in her room, perfectly sized, after Garrett noticed her old one was threadbare. His hand at the small of her back, steadying her when she stumbled on the stairs. The way he listened intently when she spoke at dinner, asking thoughtful questions about her opinions on everything from Lily's progress to current events she'd read about in the newspapers. The ranch hands began to notice too. Maeve overheard two of them talking near the stables one afternoon when she was helping Lily practice her riding. "Boss is different lately," one said. "More patient, almost human. It's the new teacher," the other replied. "You see the way he looks at her? Man's smitten, even if he won't admit it." Maeve urged Clover forward quickly, not wanting to hear more, her face burning. She couldn't afford to let speculation and gossip complicate an already delicate situation. But complications arrived regardless, in the form of Thomas Henderson. It was a Saturday in mid-June when a carriage rolled up to the main house. Maeve was in the garden with Lily, identifying medicinal herbs, when Walter approached with an uncomfortable expression. "Miss Sullivan, you have a visitor from town, Mr. Thomas Henderson. He's waiting in the front parlor." Maeve's stomach dropped. "Did he say what he wants?" "No, ma'am. Just that it was a personal matter." Lily looked up from the chamomile she'd been examining. "Who's Mr. Henderson, Miss Sullivan?" "Someone I used to work for, sweetheart. Stay here with Walter while I see what he needs." Inside, Thomas stood by the window, his soft middle straining against his vest buttons, his thinning hair slicked back with pomade. He turned when she entered, his expression a mixture of condescension and determination. "Maeve, you're looking well. Country life seems to suit you, Thomas. This is unexpected." She deliberately didn't invite him to sit. "What brings you to Thornhill Ranch?" "I've come to make things right between us." He moved closer, reaching for her hand. She stepped back. "I've had time to think about what happened, and I realize I may have been too harsh. My father's health has worsened, and I find myself overwhelmed with the store's responsibilities. I would still like you to reconsider my proposal." Maeve stared at him in disbelief. "You're asking me to marry you again? After you fired me and told me I should be grateful for your lukewarm interest because I wasn't pretty enough to do better?" I was frustrated and spoke in anger. "Surely you can understand that." His tone suggested she was being unreasonable. "I'm offering you security, respectability. Whatever you're earning here as a servant can't compare to being a shopkeeper's wife." "I'm not a servant," Maeve said coldly. "I'm a governess and teacher, and I have more respect and appreciation in this position than I ever had working for you." Thomas's face reddened. "Don't be foolish, Maeve. You're getting older every day. How many more chances do you think you'll get? I'm willing to overlook your pride, your stubbornness, even your plain appearance. That's enough." The deep voice came from the doorway, and both Maeve and Thomas whirled around to find Garrett standing there, his massive frame filling the entrance. His expression was thunderous. "You need to leave now," Thomas puffed up indignantly. "I'm having a private conversation with Miss Sullivan." "No, you're insulting a valued member of my household staff." Garrett moved into the room, and Thomas instinctively stepped back. "You're speaking to her with disrespect, making it clear you view her as beneath you while simultaneously asking her to marry you." That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Now see here, I'm not finished. Garrett's voice dropped lower, becoming more dangerous. Miss Sullivan is one of the most intelligent, capable, and principled people I've had the privilege to know. She's transformed my daughter's education and brought light into a household that badly needed it. Whatever inadequacies you perceive in her appearance say far more about your lack of vision than any actual deficiency on her part. Maeve felt her throat tighten with emotion as Garrett continued. She is not plain. She is striking in her strength and grace. She is not too old or too anything. She is exactly who she needs to be. And the fact that you can't see that proves you don't deserve her consideration, let alone her hand in marriage. Thomas's face had gone from red to purple. You can't speak to me this way. This is my property, and I can speak to you however I choose. You have 60 seconds to get back in your carriage and leave before I have you physically removed. The threat was delivered calmly, but there was no mistaking Garrett's seriousness. Thomas looked between them, seeming to finally grasp that he'd miscalculated badly. He grabbed his hat from the side table. You'll regret this, Maeve. Both of you will. He stormed toward the door, but Garrett's voice stopped him one last time. Henderson, if you come back here again, or if I hear you've been spreading gossip about Miss Sullivan in town, I'll make sure every business owner in the territory knows exactly what kind of man you are. I have considerable influence, and I'm not afraid to use it. Are we clear? Thomas left without another word. The front door slammed, and moments later they heard his carriage wheels crunching down the drive. Maeve stood frozen in the parlor, overwhelmed by what had just transpired. Garrett turned to her, his expression softening. Are you all right? You defended me. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. You called me striking. I called you what you are. He moved closer, his dark eyes searching her face. Did you think I was exaggerating? Saying things I didn't mean? I thought you were being kind. Protect your employee, Maeve. He reached out and cupped her face with one large hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I don't do kind. I do honest. And honestly, that man was a fool for not seeing your worth. But I'm grateful for his foolishness, because it brought you here. She leaned into his touch without thinking, her eyes closing briefly. When she opened them, his face was closer than before. Garrett, we shouldn't. I know all the reasons we shouldn't, he interrupted. I've listed them to myself every night for weeks. You work for me. You care for my daughter. It complicates everything. But Maeve, I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop wanting to be near you, to talk with you, to... He stopped himself, jaw clenching. To what? She asked breathlessly. Instead of answering with words, Garrett bent down, a long way down given their height difference, and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost questioning, giving her the chance to pull away. When she didn't, when instead she rose on her toes and kissed him back, he pulled her closer with a low sound that vibrated through his chest. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent. His hands spanned her waist, and she gripped his shoulders, feeling the solid muscle beneath his shirt. Everything else fell away, propriety, caution, fear. There was only this moment, this man, this connection that had been building since the night she'd cared for his sick daughter. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. I need you to know something, he said roughly. This isn't casual for me. I haven't felt anything for anyone since Sarah died. I didn't think I could. But you've changed that. You've changed me. I'm scared, Maeve admitted. Scared of losing this job if things go wrong. Scared of being hurt. Scared of not being enough. You are more than enough. His hands tightened on her waist. And you won't lose your position. If you decide you can't do this, then nothing changes professionally. I swear it. But Maeve, I'm asking you to try. To give us a chance. Before she could answer, they heard Lily's voice calling from outside, and reality crashed back in. They stepped apart quickly, though Garrett's hand lingered on hers for a moment. We should continue this later, he said, when we have privacy and time to discuss it properly. But think about what I said. Please. He left through the front door, heading back toward the stables, while Maeve took a moment to compose herself before returning to the garden. Her lips still tingled from his kiss, her heart racing with a mixture of exhilaration and terror. That night, after Lily was asleep, Maeve found a note slipped under her door. The handwriting was bold and decisive. Unmistakably Garrett's. "Meet me in my study at 10 o'clock. We need to talk." Luigi at precisely 10, Maeve knocked softly on the study door. Garrett opened it immediately, checking the hallway before ushering her inside and closing the door. The room was lit by lamplight, warm and intimate. His desk was covered with ledgers and correspondence, evidence of the work that consumed his evenings. "Sit, please." He gestured to the leather chair near the fireplace, then took the one opposite, rather than retreating behind his desk. "I want to discuss this situation between us, honestly and completely." Maeve settled into the chair, folding her hands in her lap. "All right, I meant what I said earlier, all of it, but I also understand this is complicated. You depend on your position here for your livelihood. I'm your employer, which creates an inherent power imbalance. And there's Lily to consider. She's become attached to you, and any relationship between us would affect her." "I've been thinking about all of those things," Maeve said. "And you're right, they're all complications. But Garrett, I've also been thinking about how I feel. About how you make me feel. And how is that?" She took a breath, gathering courage. "Seen, valued. Like my mind and abilities matter as much as anything else. You challenge me intellectually. You respect my opinions. You've never once made me feel less than because of how I look. And when you kissed me today," she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I felt wanted. Not for what I could do for you or how I could serve your purposes, but for who I am." Garrett leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That's because I do want you for who you are. Your intelligence, your compassion, your strength, your honesty, the way you laugh at Lily's jokes even when they're terrible, how you lose yourself in books, the fierce expression you get when you're passionate about something. All of it. But what happens if we try this and it doesn't work?" Maeve voiced her deepest fear. "I can't lose Lily. She needs stability, consistency. And I need this position." "Then we're careful," Garrett said. "We take this slowly. We don't tell Lily or the staff until we're certain. And I draw up a contract, a real legal document, that guarantees your position and salary regardless of what happens between us personally. That way you're protected." Maeve blinked. "You'd do that? Put it in writing? I told you I value honesty and honor. I won't have you feeling trapped or dependent on my goodwill. You should have security independent of my affections." His mouth quirked slightly. "Though I should warn you, my affections are quite decidedly engaged at this point." A laugh bubbled up from Maeve's chest, surprising them both. "You're a remarkable man, Garrett Thornhill. Has anyone ever told you that?" "Not in those words, no. Most people use terms like demanding, difficult, or stubborn as a mule." "You are those things too," Maeve said with a smile. "But you're also honorable, protective, and surprisingly thoughtful when you choose to be." He stood and extended his hand to her. "So is that a yes? You'll give us a chance." Maeve placed her hand in his, letting him pull her to her feet. Standing this close, she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Yes, but slowly, like you said. I need time to trust this is real." "It's real," he promised, then demonstrated just how real by kissing her again, this time with more confidence and less restraint. When his arms wrapped around her, Maeve felt simultaneously protected and desired, a combination she'd never experienced before. When they finally broke apart, Garrett rested his chin on top of her head, holding her close. "I should let you go before someone notices your absence and starts gossiping." Probably wise. But neither of them moved immediately. "Maeve?" "Yes, that man today, Henderson. When he said those things about you not being pretty enough, not deserving better, I want you to know he was wrong about everything. You deserve someone who sees your true beauty, inside and out. And I intend to be that someone, if you'll let me." Maeve pulled back enough to look up at him. "You really see me that way? You're not just saying what I want to hear?" "I'm terrible at saying what people want to hear," Garrett pointed out wryly. "Ask anyone. But I'm excellent at seeing what's real and valuable. And you, Maeve Sullivan, are both." She went up on her toes and kissed him once more, pouring into it all the gratitude and hope and growing love she felt. When she finally returned to her room, she stood at the window, looking out over the moonlit ranch, her fingers touching her lips where the memory of his kisses lingered. 3 months ago, she'd been told she wasn't pretty enough to marry, that her best opportunity was settling for someone who saw her as a convenient solution to a business problem. Now she stood in a home where she was valued, teaching a child she'd come to love, and being courted by a man who saw her strength as beauty and her intelligence as treasure. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd come to Thornhill Ranch expecting to be merely a housekeeper. Instead, she'd found purpose, family, and the beginning of something that felt remarkably like love. Outside, a wolf howled in the distant hills, and from the bunkhouse came the low murmur of the ranch hands settling in for the night. This was her world now, vast and challenging and full of possibility. And for the first time in her life, Maeve felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out! And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.